All right. Welcome. If you're new to my channel, I hope that you find something that works for you here and something that keeps you intrigued and wanting to come back. If you're not new, thank you for being here. Thank you for continuing to come back and spend your time with me and continue to dig into certain areas of cases that can be confusing and learning about different information. First of all, I'd like to say that everything that is said here is my opinion. The situations we talk about here are alleged unless otherwise proven later on. You know, my name is 12 Gauge. Welcome. Tonight we're going to talk about something that was being spoken on in another creator's live this morning that I saw um was being discussed, and I thought that I'd get on here and I'd discuss it and actually talk about it. Hello, Sabrina. Yes, I just started the live, so you're right on time. um Anyways, the title is Alibis, Sweet Little Lies. And this was being discussed in a live this morning, and I wanted to really not steal the topic because I know that they're going to talk about it in another stream of theirs. But I want to, I always give my little spin on it because, people's misconception of law and definition and the way it's handled a lot of times um, dictates a lot of where their thought process goes. Sometimes if you're in a situation where you believe something based on your own identification of the facts or how you put together your thoughts to tell you, well, this happened, so that must have caused this to be this. That is the only reason that I'm bringing this up tonight. So let me go ahead and play a little video that I found a while ago, and it is about the alibi. And I titled it Idaho 4 because, Koberger's alibi has been questioned since he gave it. He gave a very standard alibi where he said he was out running or he was out driving around. Hey Georgia, how you doing? How you doing? Thank you for being in the chat. He stated that he was out driving around. They never clarified whether it was during the crimes or anything of that nature. It was just that his alibi was he was out driving around. Okay, so the video is basically going to tell you about the court process and how alibis usually go in the process. So it's going to be an intellectual one tonight. So if you're really not in the mood to be given facts and shown things, um, this might not be the live for you. But if you're wanting to know how the alibi is going to be addressed during the court process and how they're using the alibi up to this point, then this is the video for you because it's going to outline a lot of things for you, and it's going to teach us all something because I know a little bit about the alibi, but I'm certainly going to learn something as well as you guys. So let me go ahead and get this started so we can get an understanding of the alibi, and then I will talk about it in word verbiage. I want to give a shout out to Greenwood Law for supplying this video. Thank you so much for putting this on YouTube so that I can um, use it for entertainment purposes and identification of what a law alibi is and the defense to criminal charges. So let's go ahead and get started with this video.
Possible. They do an excellent job with us, so thank you for that. Uh, what we're going to talk about today, here on Greenwood Law, we're all about your rights, protecting your rights, informing you of your rights. Well, one of the things that we've never quite touched on in depth, that I think sometimes you just sort of take for granted as a defense attorney, are the defenses.
All right.
It's just something that we think of, we know of, we carry them with us in the back of our mind each and every time that we step into a courtroom or talk to someone on the phone or in person. And so today we're just going to kind of go down some of those and talk about what they are, how they work in a court of law, which can be quite different than how you might see it pan out on like Law and Order, for instance. So, I think what we're going to do is kick off, Harold, with some of these bars to being able to be prosecuted even in the first place. And I think the first one is double jeopardy, which there's a really famous movie about. And there's a lot of people.
People think they know what double jeopardy
people
is. Bring it up
they
a
know,
lot.
but you think you know, but you have no idea.
Right. And so double jeopardy comes from the Fifth Amendment in our Constitution that essentially says that a person cannot be tried twice for the same offense, essentially, for the same criminal conduct. And how that actually plays out is pretty complicated as to how that plays out, not the most intuitive thing. And part of that is because there's just a lot to it. So there can be a lot with, does that play out on the state and federal level? Or when does jeopardy attach in a case, so that double jeopardy is a thing. So there's sometimes that we go into cases and proceed down a course in a case and something happens and we have to, come back to that case, or it needs to be retried later. Or when does jeopardy attach? And so all those things are important to look at and to see if a person, if that bars a person from being prosecuted. Did you want to get into the specifics on them?
Yeah, and I mean, double jeopardy attaches what we call arraignment. There are actually times in which the state of North Carolina can take a dismissal on a case, or maybe they say that they're unable to prosecute a case. But if witnesses show back up again, if new evidence comes to light, there's a chance that they could bring those charges back up because double jeopardy hasn't attached. Basically, arraignment is that formal time that you go and you say guilty or not guilty. And that's just the easiest way to think of it.
Okay, so he spoke on arraignment, which basically, as he said, is a time period when you determine if somebody's guilty or not guilty. And I did a live the other day that kind of goes along with some of these terms that you're going to hear. So if you notice, most of my lives and my streams have the puzzle piece effect. So if I talk about something one day, I try to on the next time add to that so that somebody can learn in the process. That way it's not too confusing. I'm not jumping all over the place. I'm not talking about 15 different things at once. So I hope that helps out a little bit. Also, as far as the arraignment, we all know that Mr. Koberger was arraigned, and we can all understand what that means. So here he's going to continue going on into the process.
And so once that happens, that's when jeopardy all of a sudden attaches. So I think that's an excellent overview that you gave. One of the other big bars is something called ex post facto. And this has nothing to do with the post office doing anything. It's a constitutional right that you have that's given you by the United States Constitution, and it's also recognized by the North Carolina Constitution, because there's a lot that North Carolina did to kind of mirror the United States Constitution. But basically it says that if you do some act, let's say that picking up a red Solo cup on today's date is a perfectly legal act, and then the next week all of a sudden the legislature passes a law that says it's illegal to pick up red Solo cups. And this law goes into effect the following week, so 2 weeks later, from the original act that you picked up a red Solo cup. The state cannot come back and charge you for the law that they're saying that you would have potentially violated because you did it before the law was ever enacted.
Sure.
You weren't on notice that that could have been a violation of the law. Now, that being said, we get calls all the time where people say, well, I didn't know what the law was. I didn't know that was a violation of the law. Ignorance of the law is not a defense. That is never going to be a defense. In fact, that's just a terrible argument all the way around, because you should know. You should know what you can and cannot do per the law.
He is so right on that. Ignorance of the law is not a defense, because you should have adequate understanding and keep up with what the new laws are for the year. Because you can't use that as a defense whenever you get pulled over, because this was okay last year and then this year it's been changed to a different law. Ignorance of the law is not a good defense. So always stay updated with the latest laws.
Laws of the state of North Carolina, the place where you live, laws of the United States where you live. But this is a time where you were not on notice because it wasn't even a law on the books. And so that makes it a bar to prosecution.
And the founders, not to get too much in depth, the founders had a real issue with this for other reasons. They didn't want anybody to go back and charge them with certain things. So they were very, very uncomfortable with being charged ex post facto. And it plays out a lot for us in sentencing, actually, because not just for a new crime that the state can't charge you with, but also if they change sentencing. So, for example, if picking up that red cup was illegal, but it was only an infraction and you could only get a fine, or then next week it is you can get 60 days in jail. Well, they can't come back and punish you for that 60 days in jail. You have to be on notice about the punishment too. So that plays out to us sometimes when we have people that have pretty old charges. They do have to be sentenced by at the time that they were charged. Another one is lack of jurisdiction. This is one that we deal with a lot. In every case that the state prosecutes, they have to prove jurisdiction. So it is something that every prosecutor knows, every defense attorney knows, that it's one of the standard questions. Where did this happen? Did it happen in Forsyth County, North Carolina? And sometimes they'll name a street or an area known in Forsyth County. That's generally enough to show the jurisdiction. But this can be an issue. I had a case recently where it was communicating threats, and sometimes if that threat happened over the phone from one county to another. This happened where the argument was in Davidson County, and we're in Forsyth County prosecuting the case, but they were driving together to a place in Forsyth County. So the issue was, well, where did the threat actually happen? So that can definitely be an issue in some of the trials we have.
Yeah, and it's an issue too, not just for the charging document, and we've had a prior episode on, all the different types of charging documents, but it's also something that has to be proved at each and every trial.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of one of those things that you're always listening for, of whether or not the prosecutor has.
So the jurisdiction was brought into question in this trial based on where he was arrested. He was arrested in Pennsylvania, which Idaho had the jurisdiction. So that's why he waived his rights and was flown back to Idaho to get arraigned. Let me see if I can find the alibi part, because I don't want to go through every
later.
part.
Well, again, that's where felonies are the exception, where the statute of limitations is forever, or until that controlled buys of drugs. That's
multiple times. It's kind of up to the defense attorneys to know that, because it's not the most known thing, but it is an immunity defense that we have here.
That's true. And there's also one kind of that same vein, for lack of a better way to put it, for needle deposits.
Right.
It's right. Kind of in the same sphere, mm-hmm. that you're saying, yeah, the act occurred, and I realized that the act occurred, but I was justified to.
Right.
So those are all the bars. Those are ways that you should not be prosecuted. So those are bars. Then you have defenses. Defenses are usually saying either that you weren't there, that's an alibi, or that whatever you did was justified in some way. That you're saying, yeah, the act occurred, and I realized that the act occurred, but I was justified due to some sort of issue that was going on.
Right.
So those are obviously different. So just real quick to talk about alibi, that's a common one that gets thrown around. And, it's actually one of the first things I always ask about. When somebody tells me that they're charged with a crime, I go, well, where were you? Where were you at the time? And, every now and then somebody's like, well, I was clear across town, and they're saying that this happened, 2 counties over, and, stuff like that. And I go, well,
Okay, so like I said a while ago, Mr. Koberger alibi, as he has stated, was he was out driving around because he liked to drive around at night. So as this guy just said, he had a client that the alibi said he was clear across town. How could he have been at the scene if he was clear across town? So let's see what else he says.
okay. And then you start thinking of all the ways that you can prove that. And, you're looking for different pieces of information, people that can identify this person, all sorts of things to try to prove an alibi. And that's something that can say, listen, I have no knowledge that this could have even have happened because I was clear across town.
Mm-hmm.
And we've actually used that in a case where the state recognized the issue from the very beginning. We were able to show via certain GPS data that our client was almost an hour away from when the crime occurred, and we had a exact time of when the crime occurred. Like, everybody knew the time, and we were able to show that, hey, this was an alibi for all of this. But that was a pretty unique circumstance.
Yeah. Going back to what you hit on earlier, dealing with a lot of these defenses, you're admitting that this stuff happened, but you have some reason. One of the most common ones we see all the time is self-defense, and we've talked about self-defense.
That was our first show
on the show. Our first show. It's nostalgic for us. We've talked about self-defense many times, and without getting too much into depth on it, it is an affirmative defense. It is one of these defenses that, of course, you're saying the act happened, but I had reason to defend myself against somebody for various reasons. So it can be in defense of yourself, in defense of others or property as well, and that can be a defense to a crime. The classic one is just an assault.
Mm-hmm.
You were assaulted, but you had reason to assault someone. Another one that is important for us, and I think is in the courts a lot, and the courts deal with is necessity
Mm-hmm.
and duress. And they seem like they are pretty close, but there's a little difference between the two of them. But just to think about necessity, specifically the crime that we see him a lot in is DWIs, and this defense brought up. And so when you bring up the necessity defense, it's that, yes, the person was driving, yes, they were in a public vehicular area, all that sort of stuff. And yes, they were impaired, but it was necessary for them to drive. A classic example would be a person's at a bar, and they were going to call an Uber. Their car, they did drive there soberly, but they were going to call an Uber. Somebody comes in with a machine gun and threatens everyone. The person gets out of there really fast and drives away. And just right as they're driving away, they get pulled over. Well, was it necessary for them to drive? Did they have to? Another example of necessity can be domestic violence in the home. Mm-hmm. They're getting assaulted in their home and they have to drive away. Either way, that can be a defense to DWI or other types of crimes.
Right. Yeah. And necessity, a lot of times necessity and duress are kind of intermingled. It's
Mm-hmm.
easy to. It's really, really easy to. The way I think about the difference between the two of them is that necessity, there's usually some like outside force that is causing you to have to do something. So I think there's this classic example in.
Okay, let's kind of stop right there because they briefly spoke on alibi. And the reason that I wanted to talk about it to begin with is the individual was trying to paint a picture that Mr. Koberger's alibi was against his right to remain silent. That the prosecution demanded an alibi after he was arrested. Of course they did. They asked for the alibi. And the thing that I said in the chat was, well, you know what? The reason that he was asked to give an alibi was so that the defense could call witnesses and cross-examine to prove that he wasn't at the scene of the crime. Does that mean that I'm pro Burger? Does that mean that I'm saying he's guilty? No, it doesn't. All they were saying were, we need an alibi. We need some sort of alibi so that we don't get blindsided in believing that at the end of, or right before the trial, you're going to say, well, I don't have to give you my alibi. And I can still call witnesses to potentially cross-examine. And this is a way for them to prevent that from happening. This individual earlier was trying to paint a picture that Mr. Koberger was being forced to give an alibi and that there's no way that he should have given one, which that is his option. It is an option to give an alibi. It would have been his option if he wouldn't have wanted to be able to cross-examine the state's witnesses, because that's basically why they wanted to know the alibi. It's kind of like, okay, tell us where you were so that when we call our witnesses and you want to cross-examine them, you know, we're not blindsided by the fact. Sabrina says, let me see what she says. It will still be very interesting to see it and what the defense come up with. I'll still believe he's innocent. I don't know why. Well, you know, the other night I was called a guilter, so, you know, I don't know. I don't really understand that terminology. I guess I never will, but it's here nor there. Um, as far as being guilty or innocent, that's not why I'm doing this. I mean, you know, we're all entitled to our beliefs and we're all entitled to our opinions, you know. I mean, I'm glad that you have an opinion because mine has shifted about 3 or 4 times. You know, I believe, okay, yeah, there it is. That'll prove that he's guilty. And then something else will come up. No, no, no. There's no way that he could be guilty. This is that and the other. You know, in that I pretty much put that on the fact that I was watching certain things come about in real time where people were influencing my thoughts by their ability to put the puzzle pieces together to make it appear that either he was guilty or he wasn't guilty. So I was watching a lot of creators, and there was a lot of guests, and there was a lot of this, and there was a lot of that. And I give it to them. They're good. They're good at trying to paint the picture one way or the other. They usually go to a panel based on their beliefs. And I guess that's one of the reasons why on this platform, there's not a lot of people over here usually chatting because we're not talking about him being guilty or not guilty. You know what I mean? Georgia says, I think that as the trial moves along, we'll have such a better feel for guilt or innocence. All right, come back when you want. We'll be here. And that's one of the reasons that I notice in other panels of creators that the chat is one-sided mostly. It's like they're either believing that he's guilty or they're believing that he's innocent. And if you go in there and you don't have one of those beliefs, then you kind of get ostracized and you're not able to share your opinion or your belief without somebody attacking you. Like I was trying to share my beliefs this morning of knowledge that I have about this. And, this individual was typing in all caps and, she was going on and on and on and on, jumping around all different topics. And, I'm like, okay, well, I have one option. I can sit here and listen to it or I can leave. So I left. I'm like, I don't have to believe this. I don't have to go along with it. He said, you might be blindsided. It's just a feeling, especially with all the things that went wrong in the investigation. And that could be very well, it could be very well. We might all get blindsided. It might fool us all, it might give us all a jolt to reality where we romanticize the case that was meant to be more about facts than our own opinions. You know what I mean? And once again, I'm not saying it's not good to have your beliefs on certain situations because that's how you grow. That's how you learn. You grow from certain life lessons, and next time you have just a little more of understanding, and you're able to say, well, you know what? Last time I thought about it like this, I didn't really give it the opportunity for that, this, the other. Well, this time I might give it just a different outlook, so it might be a different outcome, That's just how things work. That's just how life works. So let me go ahead and go with the written stuff. A lot of time that's easier to understand in a video because it's pretty one-dimensional. It's not jumping around. And as you can tell, I'm one of those individuals that likes order. I like certain situations to flow. I don't like them to be jumping around all over the place. So here we go. This is one of those things where I hope that y'all can see that. It says, can I surprise the prosecution with an alibi defense at trial? Let's say I've been accused of murder. Throughout the investigation, I pled the fifth, so as to where I was and the crime happened. Eventually, I'm put on trial, still pleading the fifth as to my whereabouts during the crime. So this individual has pled the fifth, meaning that they're not saying anything. Then, when put on the stand during the trial, I finally tell the court and the jurors that I had an airtight alibi the entire time and have just refused to share it until now. Let's say the alibi could result in some trivial criminal charges being filed, like loitering. So I do have the right to claim I had a reason to fear bearing witness to myself. I hope that's understandable. Like bearing witness means that this individual didn't want to incriminate himself. He didn't want to say, okay, this is where I was, but I was committing a crime at the same time, so that's my alibi. I'm wondering what would happen at this point. The prosecution wouldn't have had a chance to prepare for this revelation, but they can't say that I or my lawyer acted wrongly if I only now decided to testify. Would this be a cause for a mistrial? Would it matter if this was a legal strategy? For instance, what if I tell my lawyer I don't want to reveal my alibi unless you think there's a greater than 50% chance the jury will find me guilty? Can my lawyer continue as normal knowing I may surprise the defense? if I deem the odds of going to jail too high, or is he in a position where he has to say something once he knows I'm intentionally withholding information to surprise the prosecution? As to why anyone would do this, I can think of two reasons. One, I know who did it and was willing to take the chances at court to protect the real person until it became clear I'll likely lose. Number two, I did the crime, but the prosecution has a theory of the crime all wrong. And so I'm intentionally looking to undermine the prosecution by surprising them with an alibi in hopes of convincing the jury that the prosecution didn't do their homework and thus I'm innocent. This part right here, number two. I believe that this is why he gave the simple alibi he gave. The simple alibi he gave was due to he either did the crime or that the prosecution got the theory of the crime all wrong. So they may have put that he did the crime, but they didn't put it together right. So this individual was intentionally looking to undermine the prosecution by surprising them with an alibi in hopes of convincing the jury that the prosecution didn't do their homework and that he's innocent. Meaning that he was hoping to use this as a way to get off and not face consequences. So let's think about this. If you're Mr. Koberger, your whole thought process in a death penalty case, let's put yourself in that position, okay? Because I can't speak for him. I can't. Let's put yourself in that position. Let's say you've been charged with a quadruple murder and a burglary, and you're in his position. Would you want to put everything out on the table to let the prosecution know how to defend that, to possibly show your guilt by revealing other things in their evidence to circumvent your innocence? I hope that makes sense. I really do. It's kind of like, whenever, if you've ever committed a crime and if you were arrested, you would want to put your best effort into convincing the other side that either they made a mistake by saying it was you could have been in the area, but these are the reasons why it wasn't you or it couldn't have been you. Him placing himself in the area, let's say by driving around, think of all the other people that were driving around. Think about the person in the black truck. Think about the white car we saw that pulled up on the 1320 Linda Lane footage, that pulled up next to the dumpster and picked that individual up. Think about the pickup or big loud truck that was on the Linda Lane footage that pulled out at 423, somewhere around there. Think about all those vehicles that were driving around. You're telling me that if they were interviewed, their alibi for driving around held water, but Mr. Koberger's didn't. Just based on the fact that Dylan saw a guy with bushy eyebrows with a certain height and transfer DNA. Because that's all that's all the PCA state that they have. Okay. I'm not one to say that that's enough or that's not enough. A lot of it's circumstantial. But the fact of the matter is this. Think of what I just asked you. Those other vehicles were driving around late at night. You saw it. You saw it on the video cameras. You saw one picking up an individual by the dumpster. You saw another one another pickup drive by while the cops were on the band field. You saw another one on the Linda Lane footage that was taking off. Not to mention any other vehicles that were seen in the area that probably were interviewed as well. So you're telling me that their interview, I was going to work, I was taking a buddy home because they're drunk, we were at this party, I'm the designated driver, I'm going to get something to eat, I got hungry in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep, I decided to take a drive. These would be their alibis, those vehicles. Okay. So you're telling me that their alibis would be sufficient for the police not to consider them suspects. They were in the vicinity. They had ample opportunity to do the same thing Mr. Koberger supposedly did. The only reason I believe, and I could be wrong, is they're trying to hopefully pinpoint that he had a motive for doing it. That's where the alibi gets kind of thrown out the window. And then if that, if the prosecution says, well, we can't get him on the alibi, the defense just pointed out, these other vehicles were out driving around and, they didn't get arrested, but her client did. Okay. Well, let's pick on the motive. What was his motive for driving around? They don't have to prove motive. Okay, they don't. But let's say they do go down that route. What was your motive? What was it? What could have been his motive to be driving around? Could it not have been just like the other three that I talked about? He was hungry. He couldn't sleep. He wasn't going to work because it was too early for that. It could have been a million reasons why. He could have got a call from somebody that needed a ride, that was broken down. Maybe a dog, maybe someone's animal was injured. You know what I'm saying? It's like a lot of these individuals are quick to forget that life goes on. And I'm not trying to prove one way or the other. I'm just throwing these out there. Georgia says Koberger's alibi would hold more weight if he had witnesses to back him up as to his whereabouts when he was driving around. I'm not gonna argue with that. You're right. As teenagers, we would drive around all weekend long if one of our parents allowed us to have a car. Very true. But let me ask you this, Georgia. What if a murder would have happened nearby where you were driving around and all the people saw was 3 people in a vehicle close to where the murder happened, or a drive-by or something of that notion? Nobody would have been able to say that your alibi was just you just doing that, just being a kid, just driving around. It's very difficult for somebody to coincide your alibi if you're just driving around. There must be more video evidence of him driving in Pullman at a certain time and in Moscow. There very well could be. We would meet up with friends when driving around, so we would have witnesses, I believe. You're very right. But I'm talking about just driving around before meeting up with your friends. You wouldn't have anybody to vouch for you during that time frame, which that would be the most important time. After the fact wouldn't mean anything because the murder would have already happened. I hope you understand what I mean by that. I'm not challenging you. I'm just trying to make you think, okay? That's all I do is I just try to make people think. I don't necessarily challenge them because you're entitled to your beliefs, and I did the same thing. I used to sneak out and borrow my mom's vehicle to go sneak over to my girlfriend's house. And young, you're doing whatever, but I'd be all over with nobody to prove that I didn't commit a crime from the moment I left my house to the moment I got back. My girlfriend could vouch that I was at her house from, let's say, 12:30 till 3:30. So that would be a time frame which she could vouch for me. But from the moment that I left my house till the moment I got there, I wouldn't have an alibi. I wouldn't be able to prove my alibi because back then there wasn't cameras everywhere. We didn't have cell phones, so there was no ping evidence. You know, it would have been very tough, and I'm a male, and I'm Hispanic descent, half and half. So it would have been hard if a crime would have occurred, especially if I met the physical description. You know, maybe they got the vehicle wrong, but they got the physical description. If at best I would have had a big inconvenience going on. And like I say, I'm just trying to get people to think, nothing else, because that's all we can do is really think about this. It doesn't matter what we believe, because at the end, if we can't prove it, then we can't prove it. Hi, Leon. How you doing? Doing great. Doing better than last night. How are you? And I'm just, that's just my rationale about all this because, the PCA state that he left his house around a certain time. Well, from the time he left his house till the time he got back, which they're going to be able to see based on the pings, based on the camera footage. But it's going to be hard to explain, especially, you went driving around for what, 12 hours, 11 hours? What'd you do in that time frame? Did you stop to eat? Did you stop to get gas? You know? Did you stop to do this, that, and the other? And that's going to be the harder thing to prove as far as while I was out just out driving around because if the camera catches you out and about, let's say the the Exxon camera for the sake of just conversation caught him on camera and that really was the Elantra, then he can say, well, that was my car. I was driving at that time at 3:45 heading in an opposite direction of when the crime happened. The crime was about to take place at 4:05. Here he is, 3:45, driving toward Pullman, not away from Pullman, if that makes sense. Then he has clarification of an alibi. He has clarification of something that can place him somewhere else, and the camera is verifying that. And if also his phone was off, so his phone can't even verify his alibi, and that's what's damning. As if his phone went dead or he turned it off, whatever people believe, if for some reason that phone would have stayed on, then the alibi probably would have held more water because it would have pinged along the way. And if that's all he was doing, then it would have shown, hey, he went from here, he went from there, he went back here, he went back there. At no time did he stop near 1122 King Road. That cell phone could have exonerated him. But we don't know if there's pings. They haven't released that to us, other than the ones that they told us that they have 12 pings of him being around the house prior to the murders. That's all we've known about the pings. We don't know if there's any of the night of. Supposedly, there was one the next morning around 9:30, but then they said, no, we have reason to believe that that ping was inaccurate. So he wasn't there at that time because the police stated out of their own mouths he wasn't there. So where was he? You get what I'm saying? I hope you guys in chat understand that I'm not trying to convince you of anything. Stay true to your beliefs because that's what makes us different. That's what makes us human is we're able to agree to disagree. Even at the end of the fact, we still can sit there and shake hands and be like, yeah, you might be right, you might be wrong, I might be right, I might be wrong. You get what I'm saying? That's all I'm really trying to do on here. I'm not trying to paint an ugly picture on anybody's beliefs. Even the person that kind of gave me the insight to do this live tonight, I'm not painting a bad picture on her because I've spoken with her on another panel. And, she's a nice lady. She's a nice woman. She has great insight on a lot of things. I just don't know if she's mistaken or maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe we weren't able to communicate our effectiveness through chat. Okay, let's see what Leona has to say. Gage, if your DNA had got on a knife sheath in such a horrific crime, you would instantly remember why you touched and where and when and why. Why can't Brian? I would think that either the defense knows that he's guilty. Based on what I read the other day in the law textbook that I was reading for my classes, it says you're not obligated to release this information to the prosecution. So if he's released information such as that, hey, that was my knife sheath. I loaned it to so and so. That's why my DNA would be on there. She could know this, but she's not obligated to give it over to the prosecution. Like I just said a while ago, if you are fighting for your life, so to speak, you're not going to want to release something that maybe he stole the knife. Maybe he bought he was given the knife for an 8-ball, I don't know, which was the commission of a crime because, selling drugs is a crime. So, and then he gave it to somebody else and they went and committed the crime. I'm just speculating here. Well, why would you say that was my knife sheath if I did it if I had the knife under the pretense of somebody gave it to me for an 8-ball and then I loaned it to you and you went and killed somebody with it? But at that point, would he be really innocent? I'm not saying he's innocent or guilty. I'm just asking a question. But would he, in that scenario, let's say that scenario was what it was, somebody gave him the knife for an 8-ball. They borrowed the knife. Oh, an 8-ball would be like an 8-ball of cocaine, an 8-ball of drugs. It would just be, a little eighth of an ounce. It's hard to explain, but okay, let's just say drugs, okay? Somebody bought some drugs from him, traded him the knife for the drugs, and then they said, hey, by the way, can I borrow the knife? After they traded it to him, they took the knives, committed the crime. His DNA is on the knife sheath. The other person wasn't. would he be guilty still? Or would he be innocent? I'm just asking. Because there's so many scenarios. There's so many scenarios. But, you know, I like to see outside the box. I don't like to be constricted in this little box, even though I'm in a camera box right here. I don't like to be constricted to my thinking. I like to look outside the box, that there could be other possibilities of how that DNA got on that ice sheet, other than the obvious. The obvious is he had it on him, touched that part, touched the snap, wiped it down, didn't get all of it off. The part that he missed is the part that convicted him. That and the car and the pings, because that's basically and the witness statement. I mean, usually that's enough to convict you if you don't have a good defense to overcome that. So I've been wanting to ask you guys this. I still got one more to go, but since you guys are here in chat, I don't want to cut it off because I'm excited that you are here talking with me. Let me ask you this, okay? And I'm asking anybody for here on out that watches this from here on out. I'm going to ask you this question. Let's take all the information that you know, and let's say it wasn't Mr. Koberger. Let's say you didn't know about Mr. Koberger. I want you to think about who would meet this description if you were the investigator and all you were given was this person between 5'11" or taller, athletic build but not muscular, clad all in black, with bushy eyebrows, and it left trace DNA on a knife sheath. Hypothetically, in your mind, of all the players that you know have been introduced into this case, who would you say your thought would be who it could be anybody else other than Brian? Rough day, but I'm doing better now. Thanks for asking. Well, Kim, I'm sorry it's been a rough day. I hope it gets better, and I hope it just got better for you. And PCA says Brian was stalking the area on the night of 21st August from 10:33 to 11:34 p.m. Further proof he was in the area at the police stop around 11:50 or so, so I wonder why they knew. Well, let's take Brian out of the mix right now. Let's say he was just another college student, teacher's assistant, and he got pulled over, and he happened to be around that area more than once. Who would you say? Okay, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. I'm not trying to say that he is innocent or guilty. I'm just putting information out there. But let's say, who else could it be? Who else could we that would meet that description that you know of that is a player in the whole thing? What told them time, date specific to the night, though? Yes, I'm sure technology. Because I want y'all to think about that, okay? So maybe on the next live, y'all can give me an answer. I really don't want an answer tonight unless you can think about it that quickly. But think about how on those other 12 times that supposedly he was in the area, and sometimes was late at night, sometimes late in the evening. Obviously, his phone was on during that time, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't have pinged. Said had the bushy eyebrows, but he seemed so sweet. Okay. Did you hear what I just said? Those other 12 times, he would have had his God, I almost said eyebrows. He almost had his eyebrows on. Um, good grief. He would have had his phone on those 12 other times, right? Because obviously his phone pinged the 12 other times. Okay. um, I'm goofy like that, guys. I'm goofy like that. Anyways, so just plain devil's advocate here. If you were quote unquote stalking somebody and you knew how cast information worked, right? Because it's not hard to get cast information, you know, technology, how it works, this, that, and the other. But he didn't turn his phone off any of those 12 times, supposedly. I don't know if he did or not, but supposedly he pinged 12 times. And you're right. Maybe it's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, any of that. But on the night that he decided to go and murder 4 people, he has the mental capacity to say, "Oh, I better turn my phone off before I get there." Because all he would have had to do, like you said, he got pulled over those times. All somebody would have had to do was see his car more than once around the area and actually see him lurking around. You tell me, if you saw Brian Koberger more than once driving around your house and you caught that vehicle and you saw him more than once, or you had a neighbor that said, "Hey, there's a guy that drives by every evening," some nosy old lady that lives next to you that says, "No offense if you're older," or some concerned neighbor says, "Hey, did you notice that there's a white Elantra that drives around every evening and early mornings when I'm letting the dog out? I see it. And there's some guy just sitting in there staring at your house. Did you know about that?" Okay, we'll get there. Tell me if you're with me here. Could this be viable? Could this be real life situation here? Your neighbor tells you, "Hey, that car's been here a lot. Do you know him? Should I be worried that they're trying to steal something from either your house or the neighborhood? Should I call the police and report it?" Obviously, nobody thought anything particular about him being around the area 12 times if he actually was around the house. But he does have a look, just like I do. We have that distinctive type of look that not a lot of people look like us. I have kind of the bigger rounded face. It's a big head. My hair is kind of up and whatever. I would not think twice if a car went through my neighborhood many times. I live in a big city and have many neighbors. We even have street takeovers with drifting in the intersection. Exactly. But would you in this little town, it's a little town, supposedly, 20,000 people. That's about how big the town is that I live in. I promise you that there's somebody that is always looking out their window, looking at the houses. I grew up in a town of 900 people. News traveled fast. I promise you, Brian Koberger would have circled the house more than 3 times in a consecutive week. Everybody in town would have known that there's a creepy guy cruising around town. And I'm not trying to be funny here. I'm not. I'm really not. But what I'm saying is, in that town, I, there wasn't very many elderly people around that house, but I'm sure there was some mature people that kept an eye out for that house, for the people that were coming and going. Somebody, even though it hasn't been released, I'm pretty certain that somebody noticed that car more than once. If he was quote unquote stalking. It depends what car is doing though. It's parked for an hour with someone inside. We all check him out in my house. See, there you go. There you go. Especially if it was Brian. Tell me, you look outside and there's a guy parked 3 houses down and he's been there for a while and he isn't getting out. He's just sitting there. You're going to get concerned. Especially 12 times. 12 times. I'm not saying that he's parked the same place all 12 times. I'm not saying that. But he supposedly drove around. The pings were around the home at least 12 times. That's a lot. And that's what got me in the very beginning because I thought, okay, he's guilty. I heard about the bushy eyebrows. I heard about clad in black. Instantly, I thought, okay, well, he was, he lost a lot of weight. He was a boxer. He would have been conditioned to do that crime in that fast of time because cardio, stamina, all this stuff. I thought, they got the white alarm more than once cruising around, making the turn, all this other stuff. This is before any of the conspiracies and everything came out. This is before Linda Lane and all that other stuff. And I thought, no, he's guilty. But after that, I really started investigating the case. I really started taking more insight instead of looking at it through my emotions and started looking at it more through the investigative side. Gage, how about the police stop not long after he left, 21st August night? Did someone report him lurking? Very well could have been, because they said he was sitting in his vehicle. If I remember correctly, they said he was sitting in his vehicle. At least I remember hearing a report of that. And instantly I thought he was, doing something else. Maybe he has a girlfriend near there. There's a possibility. Maybe he has a friend with benefits around there. I mean, we don't know. Like I said earlier, anytime that you get in your vehicle, I'm about to go to the gym after this live with my little nephew. Okay, so he's my alibi. Exactly. Sitting in your vehicle is not a crime. I'm about to go to the gym with him. From the moment we leave here to the moment we get to the gym, we're each other's alibi. Not that we need one, but at least he could, he could say, well, he was with me. Blah, blah, blah. Well, if he wasn't in the truck with me, how could I prove other than, I mean, people see you, they're going to say, most of the time, they don't want to get involved. That's what makes this case so hard. Is people don't want to get involved. They don't want to be the one that says, yeah, I saw him. No, he was just driving around. He's cool. I saw him at the mini mart. He pulled in, sat there for a couple minutes, played, you know, sat there and listened to music, then drove off. People don't want to get involved. They don't want to be the ones that collaborate your alibi. It's very difficult for 400 people to want to talk to Ann Taylor, much less one be his alibi. Now, let's say he texts somebody before he turned his phone off. Maybe he texts somebody, maybe he texts his mom, says, hey, mom, I've had a bad day. I hate it here. I don't really know anybody. I'm going to turn my phone off because I need to clear my head. I'll call you in the morning. Turns his phone off. Goes, drives around. I don't know. I mean, I've done that before. I've been so angry and I've told people, hey, I'm going to go for a drive. I'm going to go out of town this weekend and turn my phone off. I'll be all right. Don't worry about me. I'll call you whenever I'm ready to talk. Just need to clear my head. Went out of town, came back, everything was good. But, I'm me, he's him. Just because he has a clean criminal record, the police will have reports made about him through year. Did not take him further. Yeah. I believe that his schooling, let me take that word believe, okay? I think that one of the things that people fail to see is the objectiveness in what he was doing for a career, what his education, all that. If you take that out the window and he's just an average guy who read true crime books or logged on to the internet and was fanatical about um, true crime and learned certain things, and you found that out later on, would you still look at him the same as if what they're telling you? He was a grad student, he's getting a PhD, he was a teacher's assistant, he did this, did that, applied for an internship, this and that. I mean, that all is very positive. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to get my bachelor's. I'm almost close to getting it. But if I decide to go commit a murder tonight, does me going to school to learn how to get the criminal justice information that is needed in my career, did that play into it, or did another psychological effect trigger me to say, you know what, tonight, I'm done with humanity. Every little thing he did wrong in his life will be put to the forefront, and probably none of the good things will play a role. I do believe his medical record Brian wants to keep sealed. Why? The answer is in them. Let me ask you guys this, okay? If you were to commit or be accused of committing a quadruple crime in a burglary as heinous as this, would you hope that they didn't get to your dirty laundry no matter what it was? Maybe you're taking antidepressant medication, maybe you're bipolar, maybe you have high blood pressure, maybe you have heart disease, maybe you have all kinds of stuff wrong with you, maybe you were abused, maybe you were molested, maybe you were adopted, maybe you were whatever. The awfulness of all this is okay. Thank you. The awfulness of all this is the fact that everybody's life is put on Main Street. Even the people who had nothing to do with this. Think about all the people that have been doxxed from the very beginning. All the people that you've read about, you've heard about, that are not even 30 years old, most of them. They're still in their early 20s. But yet, people have tried to put them in this heinous crime just based on their connection to the victims who passed away that night. Would we know all these people's information if people weren't digging so hard to give it to us? You know, the boyfriend, the ex-boyfriend, the hoodie guy that walked him home or walked him to the grub truck, the bartender, all the people that people have been pointing fingers at And people have been digging and digging and digging. The professor at the college, and the list goes on and on and on. Would we know anything about any of those individuals? Would you want to be one of those individuals who everywhere you went, they'd be like, hey, you're so and so. I know who you are. And they start rattling off your life to you. And you're like, how the hell do they know all this about me? And then you remember, oh, yeah, because I knew Kaylee. Different line to study. It's not a hard degree at UNI. He hadn't got his PhD in the damn degree anyways. Thanks, Leon. I'm loving y'all's comments. Thank you so much. Keep them coming. Um, you know, would would you want that for any of your family members to be having a YouTuber camped out in their front yard, waiting for them to come out to be asking them a million questions about where you were? I know, but if he was a business major in marketing like the girls, he wouldn't know how to keep the crime scene clean. Do y'all get what I'm saying? It's such a travesty that we can't just focus on the victims and we have to dig so deeply into so many other people involved. You notice how, and I hope people don't do this, but you notice how most of the digging has to do with the victims' intermediate circle and they don't have hardly anything to do with Brian's? Like, they're not calling up Mr. Koberger and asking him to come on these panels for an interview. They're not calling up the sisters asking them for an interview. They're not asking the mom to come up here for an interview. They're not asking grandma. They're not asking, you know, his first, second, third grade friends. They were interviewing them, but obviously something happened that they stopped. So they just focused on one side and they wanted, instead of interviewing these people, they were making them suspects. That is awful. That is awful. If Brian did this, I hope that he gets what the law state that he should have, because at this point, only he knows if he really did it or if he didn't. I would believe that based on the information that we've been allowed to have, there's a good possibility that he did do it. And even if he didn't do it, there's a good possibility that it played a role in it. Whether it be a decoy, whether it be a driver, whether it be part of the cleanup crew, whether it be just an advisor, something like that. You know, with True Gage, he was checked out the degree he hadn't gotten his PhD in that he is made genius about. He knows nothing about the deed he did, but knowledge of cleaning up, maybe yes. I mean, but he's still guilty, even if there was more, even if there were other people involved. Even if there were other people involved, the proximity of the crime. So him knowing or having knowledge of it, even though he wasn't the one that stabbed him, if he knew about it, it actually was in that home after the murder, then he's guilty of murder. Guilty by association. If it was his knife that they used, I'm sure he could be culpable of some kind of criminal act. Hey, Leon, do you think maybe he was failing at getting his PhD? Maybe that's why he went off the rails. How much people did that psychology degree that needed to see one? How much people did that psychology degree that you needed to see one? Are you asking like how much before the psychology degree in order to talk to somebody and give them advice and listen? 0. Life experiences. I used to be that guy, people always came to ask me advice and things of that nature. I don't know if that's what you meant by that, but yeah, 0. But I've just given you guys something to think about, some other avenues. And I want to close this out with the alibi thing because we've talked a lot about this. Leon, I saw you in another creators chat the other day. I was gonna say hi, but I didn't stay in there very long. Um, there's a lot of drama going on in the YouTube land, so I didn't stay in that chat very long. But I saw you in one the other day. I'm starting to recognize you guys. I saw you, Kim, in another one also. Um, and it's great that you guys are open-minded enough to go to chats where you feel comfortable. I hope that each time that you come over here that you feel comfortable and that you actually feel like I'm giving the information not based on my emotion but based on the analytical part of my brain. And you're right, it's very crazy, and that's one of the reasons I'm not covering that case, because I don't want to throw my hand in, I don't want to throw my hat in the ring because there's no way. There's no way. Well, let's talk about this alibi thing, and then I'll take some more questions or comments, and then we'll call it a night because I've already been on here an hour and 20 minutes. Like I said, I got it. You guys are my alibi. I was here. Hope one of you would say, yeah, 12 gauge was on live. Hope y'all can see that. It says alibi and witness. The key differences. Introduction. The criminal justice system is a complex web of procedure, laws, and principles designed to ensure fairness, justice, and protection of innocents. Central to this system are two crucial elements, alibis and witnesses. Both play pivotal roles in the process of establishing facts and determining guilt or innocence. But they serve distinct functions. In this article, we drive into the key differences between an alibi and a witness, exploring their roles, significance, and impact in legal proceedings. This is a long document. I'm not gonna go through it all tonight. So I'm gonna do the alibi and probably the witness and some other parts, but I'm not gonna go through all of it. If you guys want to go look at this, it's on freelaw.in, and you can let me put the link in the StreamYard so you guys can go look at it after we log off if you want to read it. I actually use this website a lot for my studies. It was one with Kim. Yeah, Gage Kim is bad news to a channel. Are you talking about the WSU Kim? Mom, something like that? Okay, the defense is shielded the alibi. It says an alibi is a powerful legal defense strategy employed in the criminal trials. At its core, it aims to provide evidence that the defendant was not present at the scene of the crime when it occurred. That's all it is. The defendant was not present at the scene of the crime when it occurred. The term alibi, as it is neither defined in the Penal Code nor in the Evidence Act of 1872. It was recognized as a rule of evidence under Section 11 of the Evidence Act. Okay, here's some of the aspects of an alibi. Absence at the crime scene. The fundamental premise of an alibi is that the defendant at the time of the alleged criminal activity was located elsewhere. This absence is crucial to create reasonable doubt in the minds of jurors or the presiding judge. So, I was out driving around. Based on your intellect, you guys in chat, let me ask you this question, okay? Um, based on your intellect, the defendant, which would be Mr. Koberger, at the time of the alleged criminal activity was located elsewhere. Do we know that? No, we don't. You know, the fact that we don't know that just draws more people into the little loop that's being created. Because he's not stupid. He's trying to try this trial in the court of public opinion, and he's managed to do that. Whether he's guilty or whether he's not, his defense is to get as many people in an uproar, one way or the other, so that he can tarnish the image of any potential juror, which is smart. I mean, if I did it, I'd want to do the same thing. I don't want people to be clear headed. I want them to think of all the craziness that's been stated so they could potentially say, you know, he's not guilty. Just too much. Hope and pray the boy is found and okay. You're right. Yeah, I agree. He knows, Gage. I thought you were saying he knew me. I was like, who? Or George, that darling boy breaks my heart. You're right. And I mean, that's a sad case, and I don't want to dabble in that at all. So that is the absence of the crime scene, establishing reasonable doubt. Alibis are introduced to raise doubts about the defendant's culpability. Culpability just means that would be the defendant's ability to be stating that the defendant could not have committed the crime due to their presence elsewhere. The defense aims to undermine the prosecution's case. Like I stated earlier on in this video, it's like a chess game. I give you this, you give me that, you counter it. Corroborative evidence. Alibis often involve presenting corroborative evidence such as witness testimony, documents, or surveillance footage to support the defendant's claim of being at a different location during the alleged crime. This evidence bolsters the credibility of the alibi. Burden of proof. In most legal systems, the burden of proof an alibi falls on the defense. This means that the defense must provide convincing evidence to establish the alibi's credibility. So this is what's going to happen next. Is he gave the alibi, okay? So his burden of proof is he's going to have to make that alibi be convincing and give evidence to establish the alibi's credibility. It may not be a credible alibi. They might ask for another one. Because if he can't provide credible evidence on what he was doing while he was out driving around, then it's not a credible alibi. It's just, okay, it is something to be deceitful. Challenging the alibi. The prosecution, in response, may challenge the alibi by presenting contradictory evidence or undermining the credibility of the alibi witnesses. So let's hope that there is a witness or there's not a witness, whichever side you stand on. We're all friends after the fact. In contrast to an alibi, a witness is a person who provides firsthand knowledge or testimony related to an event or situation in a legal proceeding. Here comes the question. Who may testify? The same is defined efficiently under Section 118 of the Evidence Act, which states that all persons shall be competent to testify unless the court considers that they are prevented from understanding the question put to them or from giving rational answers to those questions. By tender years, extreme old age, disease, whether the body or mind or other cause of the same kind. Witnesses can be called by either the prosecution or the defense, and they may serve the various roles. Testimony. Witnesses provide testimonies regarding their observation, experience, or knowledge relevant to the case. Their testimony can either support or challenge the claims made by both sides. Eyewitnesses are individuals who directly saw the alleged crime or specific event related to the case. Prosecution witnesses, individuals brought into court by the prosecution to testify in support of their case. Dumb witnesses, a witness who is not capable of giving verbal or oral statement that is allowed to give the same in any other manner. Character witnesses, people who testify about the defendant's character, reputation, or moral standing. Interested witnesses, any person who is not directly linked with the case but interested in its verdict and wants the accused to be behind the prison for the committed crime. Oh God, there would be a lot of interested witnesses in this case, don't you believe? There'd be a lot of people lining up to say, yeah, I want this person to be locked up. False witnesses, an individual who appeared before the court and deliberately gives false testimony to elongate the court proceeding. Expert witnesses, professionals with specialized knowledge or expertise in areas like forensics, medicine, or finance who provide expert opinion to help the court understand complex issues. Defense witnesses, individuals who justify the contentions of the defense by providing statements that can discharge the accused from any charges filed against them. Child witnesses, a child can testify if he or she can understand the asked questions. Fact witnesses, individuals who provide factual information about the case but may not have seen the crime occur. Chance witnesses, any person who is coincidentally present at the site where the crime was committed or is passing through the crime scene at the time when the crime occurred is known as a chance witness. Okay, next time I will talk about part 3, alibi versus witness, the key differences. And go ahead and mark this down. I hope that clarified a little bit on any area that that you may have had questions on. Brian is fitting his alibi in for his narrative. The surviving victims don't need a narrative, but it's twisted by creators. I agree with you. I mean, I hope I don't twist any of the narrative for anybody because honestly, I'm trying to be neutral in the fact. You know, that's it. I'm trying to be neutral. I mean, like I said earlier, if Brian did it, I hope he gets what consequence comes to him. I said that the other night and I got called a guilter, you know? If he's innocent, hope he goes free. And they have the budget enough to go find other suspects, or they've looked into other suspects and they bring other suspects to trial, you know? That's how I feel, Gage. I need to watch the trial, then my mind will be made up. That's why when I get jury summons, I always tell the foreman or whoever's in charge, I say, hey, I can't just hear one side and make my decision on one side. I need to hear both sides in order to kind of go with my mind to see which information is more viable to the decision that I want to make. And I've been kicked off a lot of juries because of that. But you guys, you know, I'm very appreciative that you guys trust my knowledge or that you enjoy something about this channel, that you keep coming back. You know, maybe there's no drama here. Maybe there's not a lot of drama. There's not a lot of people arguing. I'm not talking about other creators. I'm not talking about other people. I'm not, you know, putting other people's information more than I am the victims or the accused. Because, you know, as much as I'd like to talk about the victims more, but ultimately there's not a lot of information on them. I have dug and dug and dug because they weren't that old, you know. They didn't have a lot of life other than what we know about. And Mr. Koberger as well. I mean, I don't know how she's going to go back 3 generations. I just don't know. Georgia, if in a total doubt, like I was taking yourself into the challenge, you haven't looked at Gray Hughes' timeline. It's a must see. I did see that, and that's very convincing as well. I mean, it is convincing. That's what I was saying earlier is you can, you can look at something like that 360 image video that I made on here. I could walk through the house and convince you by my wording based on what the PCA said. I could convince you that it was possible that he did it. And I've seen some 3D animations that are very convincing. It's very convincing. But at the end of, I would just suggest that at the end of whatever you watch or whatever you hear, that you stick true to your understanding of what you would take out of the whole situation and what you really understand for yourself. Not let anybody tarnish your belief system because a lot of it's based on your morals, values, and beliefs. And those three things drive a lot of our decision making. So don't ever settle those for anybody. Nobody. Because a lot of creators really they try to push their narrative sometimes a little too harsh. And in the end, we have to remember that we're not the judge, we're not the jury, we're not the prosecutor, we're not the defense, and we're not the accused. And if we're truly for the victims, pushing so hard to convince other people that can't make a change in the jury decision, it makes no sense to me, but it might make sense to you. I never watched Gray Hughes, but the Knife Sheets IgG one is what swayed me. Okay. Well, ladies, there's no gentleman in here tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I went a little longer than anticipated. If you want to get in touch with me, my email address is under my page. I think basically it's 12 gauge Phillips41 at gmail.com. If you have any more questions and I have time to answer you, I will do so. But if you have any kind of information for me or anything that you would feel that you'd like to see me cover or any other case that you'd like to see me cover, just let me know. I'll do some research and I'll try to cover it. I watched Gray Hughes drive from the house through the countryside. That drive showed that he probably practiced it before he used the map. True crime community not telling you evidence that they're either. We'll try to understand this, okay? All the evidence before the judge put the gag order on was given. The stuff that was leaked, you have to ask yourself, is it real? Did somebody mess with it? Because another creator right now is on the hot seat for altering an Amber Alert poster, altering a phone call or something, some sort of that nature, whatever. So you can see how things can be altered just to fit a narrative that somebody may want to push. And the simple fact is they don't want to be held accountable for it. Speaks a lot about their character. So you have to ask yourself, based on what I see and what I know and what I've read, what makes the most viable sense in this scenario? Let's take out the frozen shock phase. Let's take out the 8 hours. Let's take out all that stuff because there's nothing in there that we know. And that'll probably be told to us at the trial. Yeah, that's crazy. And it's illegal, I'm sure, but I'm not, I'm not police department or anything like that. But let's take out the Banfield, let's take out even Linda Lane to an extent. Let's take out the driver by the dumpster, let's take out all that. So all you really have is DoorDash, you have the rideshare driver, you have the corner club, you have the grub truck, and obviously you have the crime scene. So if you took out all those other extra situations, could you, in your mind, based on what the evidence that you have today, based on what the PCA says, whether you agree with it, where people have told you it's too long, it's written like a third grader wrote it, whatever you've heard people say, use your mind based on the evidence and what you have seen with your own eyes, not what people have told you. Is there enough to convict this man based on what we have right now? And if there's not, then you must stick with that. You must stick with that belief at this moment there is not. That does not mean that when the trial starts, you're unable to say, okay, that's the piece that I needed. Yes, I see it now. Because people are going to try to sway you. They can make you. Have you ever bought a car that you weren't intending to buy? Like you just went up there to look, and the next thing you know, you're driving off with a car? I've done that many a times. So stick to the facts. Stick to the facts. Because people are good at wordplay. They're good at saying what they want you to hear in order for you to believe what they want you to believe. Look at how they react when you don't believe what they want you to believe and you go with your own interpretation. Do they get angry? Do they kick you off the paddles? Do they block you? Do they start crap about you? Do people gang up on you? This, that, and the other. If they do, then they're not really legit. They're trying to push a narrative that they hope, for whatever reason, keeps coming. And I hope that, yeah, some can sell ice to Eskimos. Very true. It's rumored the Exhibit A PCA they read to us has been fake too. I've heard that. You know, if God's willing, I'm planning a trip in November to Idaho. I'm going to go to Moscow. I want to go see it for myself. I want to go take a walk down 1122 area. I want to go by Queen Road Apartments. I want to, not stop and video every site that's already been seen, but I want to see for myself. I want to take the drive that Koberger took. I want to document, maybe a night drive. I might document the night drive. But other than that, I want to take a ride. I want to go see it just for my own eyes. That way, when the trial happens, I'll have an understanding of the roads. I'll have an understanding of the houses, how close they were, things of that nature, because that's how my mind works. Well, keep digging for yourself. That's great. I'm thrilled that you guys are analytical thinkers, Don't let these chats dictate where your mind goes, If you disagree, continue to disagree. It's fine. That's what makes you unique. That's what makes you you. We're all born with a brain. Too bad more people don't use it. It comes down to this. Either you're a leader or you're a follower. If you're easily led, you'll fall for anything. If you're a leader, You pave the way. You do the work. So keep your mind on some of these creators who you view do the work. You know? Will you guys be I'll do that on the next live. Be sure to be here, okay? Remind me of that question. And I'll try my best to do it. All right? I hope you guys stay vigilant out there. Keep yourself safe. And you women, be very aware of your surroundings. Be very aware of everything around you because not everything's as safe as it used to be. And it's okay to carry something to protect yourself because there's a lot of people going missing, just poof, vanished into thin air. So take care of yourselves. Let your people know where you're at. And even install a Life 360 um, app on your phone if you don't have one, because that's hard to take off, even if somebody steals your phone, you know? So take care of yourselves and be hyper vigilant. Doesn't mean you have to be paranoid. Till next time, guys. Maestro, cue the music.